The past decade certainly brought a wide variety of severe weather to western and central Wyoming, and whoa, what a decade it was! From floods to fires, snowstorms, hailstorms, landslides, tornadoes, severe cold waves, and heat waves. We have seen it all in the past decade. Many events were notable, but only a few made the cut for the top weather events of the decade.
Hello and welcome to the top weather events across western central Wyoming. For the past decade, I'm your host, meteorologist Chris Haddings. Had a wide variety of them, from warm weather stuff such as fires and floods and tornadoes, all the way to winter weather stuff like blizzards. Well, we have many events that we want to include in this. We'll start with our honorable mentions. They didn't make the top 10, but still deserve a mention. Here's a list of them right now.
Never seen this much hail! They're like golf balls!
And now we'll start the countdown of the top 10 events. First 4, 10 through 7, just a brief picture or video of what they were. Then when we get to number 6, a more in-depth look at some of the more in-depth pictures and also some of the meteorology behind them. Enjoy the countdown. We'll start with number 10. Well, this is the biggest severe weather outbreak we had across western and central Wyoming. During the 2010s, it occurred on June 12, 2017. Tell by this picture here, had some tornadoes involved. This is taken in KC. As is this picture. I'll have more in the details on this tornado in just a moment. A little meteorological setup as we take a look at this. This is a 500 millibar chart, basically what the winds are doing, say about 3 to 4 miles up in the atmosphere. Now you can see that big circulation there. It's what meteorologists call a strong upper level low, basically a circulation in the atmosphere and at that height. Now, most of the time we get stuff like this during the winter months, and we get our big snowstorms. Now, the big difference between winter and summer, obviously, is the strength of the sun. Now, this occurred only 10 days from the solstice, so had a lot of energy coming in from this, so it really made the atmosphere unstable. The other thing we look at here, see how those lines, what we call height lines, are separating with height? That's what meteorologists call upper level divergence. Basically, air is being evacuated out of the top, so it has to come up from the bottom. When you get rising air, you get clouds, you also get thunderstorms. The other thing we want to look at here, this is what meteorologists call a skew-T diagram, basically plots of humidity, temperature, as well as wind as it goes up in the atmosphere up to about 100,000 feet. Now, a couple of features I want to look at that are conducive for that severe weather outbreak. First thing I want to look at here is what we call low cloud tops. Meteorologists call this the LCL, or elliptic condensation level. Now what this basically shows is it's pretty low. Now usually when we get thunderstorms in Wyoming most of the time, because we have dry air at the low levels, they form pretty high, so the bases are pretty high. They're actually fairly low this day. And when we also added this addition here, called wind shear, see all those wind bars over on the right go from southeast to southwest pretty quickly at the low levels? That's low level wind shear that's conducive to turning thunderstorms, making them severe, and also helping them spin to help produce severe weather as well as tornadoes. When you combine those two together, any spin it does have, it can form funnel clouds, and it's a lot easier for those clouds to reach the ground. So as we take a look at some parameters, this was put out by the Storm Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma. See that moderate risk there? It's a little east of us. This is noticeable because this is the first moderate risk that was issued for Wyoming since 2010, so very noticeable there. There were a lot of tornadoes down in Cheyenne's area. Another thing we look at here, now every time you look at SPC maps, you see the hatched area. That means bad things are going to happen, obviously. Hatched area there is basically a chance of tornado EF2 strength or greater, includes part of our area as well, about a 10% chance there. Now the hail is really impressive there. You can see the hatched area there. That's hail 2 inches or bigger in diameter, basically bigger than a golf ball. And that can really do some damage to your head of your car if you're caught out in it. That did extend into our area as well, Johnson County as well as Natrona County. So as we take a look at the storm reports, that matched up pretty well. You can see 5 different reports of tornadoes. One of those is a duplicate though, and also reports a large head. Now look at that swath across southeastern Wyoming. area from Colorado, southeast Wyoming, and the Panhandle, Nebraska. I think they counted somewhere from 20 or 25 confirmed tornado reports there. So very notable outbreak for them as well as us. So as we sum it up, you can see we had 4 tornadoes across the area that day. 3 of them were typical of this landspout weak tornadoes across Park and portions of Bighorn counties. But there was one very noticeable one. That was one in KC. You see the background picture is taken from KC from that event. That was the strongest tornado we had since 2001. Also the strongest in this decade. It was rated an EF2. Numerous reports of large hail, the largest being baseball bombarding the same cell that produced that tornado there. And also strong winds on the dry side of the storm, the dry slot punching from the south. Widespread wind gusts over 60 miles per hour across Sweetwater as well as Sublette counties. Even into Lander there, wind gusts to hurricane force there, knocked down a lot of trees. It did some damage to some outbuildings as well. Well, we have a little bit of a summary of your pictures coming up here as well as a video of a tornado with somebody driving down I-25 as it formed and touched down on the ground. Stay tuned for number 5. Well, the next event, if you were in Casper in the fall of 2015, especially north of Casper, you remember this very vividly. That's the Coal Creek fire that occurred in the middle part of October. You can see some burned out houses in this picture, as well as some overhead look at the fire here. Now, some meteorological factors that led to this. You need dry fuels, you need wind as well. So I'll take a look at what helped with those. This is a SKU-T diagram. You can tell I like these. You can tell a lot about the atmosphere. See 2 lines there. The one on the right is pressure, the one on the left is moisture. And if you see a large separation like that, it means we have low relative humidity. You can see that's quite low. That dries the fuels out, makes it easy for them to catch fire. Now to spread it, you need wind. Now take a look at the wind barbs over on the right there, over on the right column. Has some pretty strong winds just above the surface, about 40-45 knots. We do have wind gusts in excess of 50 miles per hour as this fire is spreading rapidly across the plains there. But you need something to mix it down to the surface. We got a couple things for that. Number one, you can see we have an approaching cold front that had just passed through the area. That helped mix it down. Another trigger for that, this is a little more technical, so bear with me. You can see the blue area, that's what meteorologists call a jet stream, basically, where the storms ride. You see that light blue just to the north over Montana? It's a little hard to see, I know. That's what we call a jet stream. Basically, it's the strongest winds inside the jet. Now, if you want to force winds down to the surface, you need to be in a couple of quadrants. Now, when you think of quadrants in the jet, think about in a car, for example, you have the 2 seats in front and the 2 seats in back. Now, to get downward motion, to help force those winds to the surface, you either want to be sitting in the passenger seat, which is considered the front right, or the rear left, which is the left back seat. In this case, Casper is going to be in the passenger seat, so if you have downward motion, it helps force those winds down to the ground. And the fire was so big, you'd actually see it on satellite. This is the old satellite before we got the new GOES 16 and GOES 17 satellites, so very impressive there. So as we sum up the fire, you see almost 10,000 acres were burned across northern portions of Natrona County, as well as going into parts of Converse County as well. 12 homes were destroyed from this, and numerous outbuildings and vehicles were burned. And unfortunately, numerous pets and livestock were killed. About $5 million estimated to be the damage from this. However, there was some very good news out of this. No fatalities from firefighters or residents from that. Now stay tuned, we'll have number 4 coming up in a minute. Oh, it's the second fire of our countdown. It came in at number 4 for the decade. And our most substantial one as well actually garnered national attention, as Newsweek and also some national outlets reported on this as well. Now, I know your head's probably still spinning from me trying to explain jet streaks in the last one, so not going to do any meteorology with this. Just a quick time lapse what happened. Reported on the 15th. Most substantial part of the fire was from the 17th to about the 27th, when there were evacuations, also road closures. Not going to read through the whole thing, just to let you look at this for a minute. And it was finally contained as we headed toward the 5th. So there's a map of the overall coverage, and I pointed out the Hoback Ranch subdivision there. That's where a lot of houses were lost. And as far as summing up the fire, it was determined it was started from the abandoned fire from either campers or hunters. They don't know which one. It burned a total of over 61,000 acres. 55 structures were lost, again, mostly in the Hoback Ranch subdivision. At the fire's peak, over 1,000 personnel assigned to fight it, over 23 million to suppress, and there were 3 injuries, those 2 aforementioned hunters, as well as a firefighter. Now, one of our meteorologists was actually on scene as the meteorologist for this fire much of the time, Michael Homay. Took some really good pictures and video of this, so we'll have quite a few of these right after I stop talking right now. See you for number 3. Oh, we head back from fire to water for our number 3 event. This was the mudslide and landslide that went through the Wind River Canyon around Memorial Day of 2015. You see quite a few slides here on the track side from this image from County 10. Dustin Taylor, I should say. This is the one from County 10. You can see the griller truck completely severed there. It took several days to fix that. Now, what caused this, you might say? Let's take a look at this radar estimated precipitation. Yeah, it's not a misprint. Over about 7 days, anywhere from about 5 to 8 inches of rain near the Wind River Canyon. Now, we usually only get about 10 inches of rain around this area each year. That's rain and snow. So about 6 to 8 months worth of rain fell in about 7 days. So that's going to cause a lot of problems no matter what. It's going to make a lot of things bad. And now, class is back in session, folks. Put on your thinking caps, a little meteorology here. Start with taking a look at some 500 millibar charts. That's about 18,000 feet above sea level. Look at this one. Focus on Wyoming. Look at that one. And finally that one. That goes over about 3 days. What feature do you see over Wyoming? You set an upper level low that's right. That means it makes the air unstable. Also causes rising air and causes rain. Now, another thing we look at, my favorite thing, the skew T. Now, what do you see here? But the most notable thing is compared to some of the other ones is look at how close the temperature and the humidity lines are. That means the atmosphere is saturated almost all the way up to the tropopause, which is where the moisture tends to end. You can see 250 millibars, that's about 45,000 feet up in the air. So that's very unusual to see that in Wyoming. It's something you normally see during a rainy day, say a place like the East Coast or the Gulf Coast. So a lot of moisture in the atmosphere. And also, look at the easterly winds all the way up to 250 millibars. Again, that's about 40,000 feet. So a lot of that moisture getting pushed in here, it tends to upslope against the mountains in this direction as well. And as a result, you get a lot of heavy rain as well. So to sum it up, US 2026 was closed for 3 days, and mudslides went across the road and the track in over 10 places on each side. Stay tuned, we'll have number 2 coming up right after this, after our usual slideshow, as well as some video. Main mudslide area. The guardrail just got completely twisted off. They have a temporary barrier up here. And some more slides on the track side. Here's the little wind turbine, if you know where that is. Bulldozer there trying to get the track done. Hopefully they'll reopen it sometime. There's the main slide area. Took the tracks out. About halfway into the river there. Where it originated? Right up there. The main rock slide that shut the road down. Some boulders in there. Something real tight. There's the guardrail. It was taken out when the roller rocks came down. Got the New Jersey barriers up there right now, basically, as a temporary fix. A lot of power there. And there's where it came from. Well, number 2, we move back to winter now. It's obviously a snowstorm. Obviously a heavy wet snow, you can see by this tree splitting. Actually 2 snowstorms. The first one occurred in late September, especially in the Wind River Basin, Lander foothills up toward the Wind River Mountains. That was the hardest hit area. Some light snow in some other places as well. Generally about 4 to 8 inches, and you're thinking, that's not that heavy. But if it falls across trees that still have full foliage on them, it can cause a lot of problems, obviously. That was the case. A lot of limbs broke off the trees. I can remember sitting in my house, hearing the limbs just break all over the place. Even full trees coming down in some cases. As a result, a lot of roads blocked, a lot of power outages, and over 7,000 customers were without power during the peak of the storm. However, there's only the appetizer. An even more impressive storm came in just about a week later on October 3rd into the 4th. Now those of you that cook and bake, you got those certain ingredients to make something just right. So if you want to have a good snowstorm in Casper, these are 4 ingredients you're really going to want to have. Number 1, take a look at this chart. It's 500 millibars. Look just to the south of Wyoming, near the corners of Wyoming, Utah, and Colorado. You have an upper level low passing just to the south of Wyoming. You want a good snowstorm in Wyoming, especially central Wyoming. That's a very good place for it. Number 2, 300 millibar chart, jet streams, the jet streaks. I talked about that earlier. I'm not going to bore you with it again. But what quadrant are we in? We're in the left front quadrant. Now, like I said before, the right front quadrant is where you get downward motion, you get a lot of wind. Left front's the opposite, you get lifting motion there. It helps lift the air, you get clouds and precipitation. One more thing to look at. Here's our old friend, the QT diagram. Two things to look at. I showed you this once already with the flooding event. Right there you can see the atmosphere very saturated, almost all the way up to the jet stream level. And one more thing you want to look at. Now think about your geography if you're around Casper. What's to the south of you? That's right, Casper Mountain's down there. Which way the wind's blowing? At the low levels. That's right, they're blowing north. Therefore it's an upslope. Hits the mountain, it rises, it cools off. Cold air can't hold as much moisture as warm air. It condenses out, you get clouds, you get precipitation, in this case snow. And with all four of these things come together, you get a very memorable snowstorm. How memorable? Let's take a look. 16.2 inches of snow at the airport. That's the 10th biggest on record at that time. And up on Casper Mountain, even more. Fell widespread reports of 2 feet, some places close to 3 feet. And a lot of water with this as well, over 2 inches of water equivalent. A little bit of rain mixed in with this at the beginning as well. As a result, still a lot of leaves on the trees. A lot of limbs came down, a lot of trees came down. 14,000 customers without power during the peak of the storm because of that. And warming shelters were actually set up along Interstate 25 from people being stranded because it was closed. A lot of other roads closed as well. This made national attention as well. I believe Mike Seidel from the Weather Channel was actually out here doing a report not far from the mall that day. And as usual right now, we'll have our slideshow and also a video we found of somebody driving around in the snowstorm. Number one coming right up after the video. Now you know the number one event across the area, at least what meteorologists think is the number one weather event in the 2010s. That's the flooding across much of the area during the spring and the early summer of 2011. Now you can start by taking a look at a couple of the hardest hit places, Fremont County especially. Main reason why, simply, there's a lot of snow. Very heavy snow in the winter, a cool spring, a lot more snow to build up there. Togi had a record snowpack and it all started coming down. All the snow coming down to the rivers, it's going to cause some problems. Several periods of flooding. There's one in May, one in June, even into the first part of July as well. Highway 2026 near Morton was probably the biggest effect there, closed for several days at the height of tourist season. A lot of people had to be diverted around it, including myself at one point. Floodwaters did reach record levels at the Wind River around Riverton as well as Kinnear. Disrupted the annual event at the rendezvous site in Riverton. And the most dramatic picture we have is the flood gauge at Crowheart was destroyed. There it is right there. The hydrologist was not very happy when he saw this, obviously. Other hard-hit area was the Bighorn Basin. Medicine Lodge is kind of an area prone to flooding. There's a lot of damage there, including the road being washed out around the campground. Hyattville itself actually flooded as well. One road actually had to have a culvert dug through it. That's Main Street. Some basements flooded there. Several homes along Tennessee Creek had basement flooding as well. And around the Bighorn Lake, something interesting happened. High water levels, some strong winds pushed a lot of debris up onto Highway 14A. They actually had to call the plows out to get that out of there. And all around the area, a lot of low-end agricultural flooding, a lot of agricultural losses from this. Now, I know a lot of you are thinking right now, why is this number one? Why isn't it a tornado? Why isn't it a hailstorm? Admittedly, flooding. I'm a photographer myself. It's not the most sexy thing to see, obviously. You know, it's not dramatic like a hailstorm or anything like that. It doesn't take good pictures. It's kind of boring to watch on TV, actually. But the reason why we picked it number one, impact. Look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 different counties were affected by this, and they're spread out across the area. So the main reason we made this number one, had the longest lasting impact for the maximum area and the most time. It lasted for about 2 months, covered a large part of the area. It also had the longest impact as far as closing roads down, as opposed to maybe a blizzard that shuts them down for a day or two, or a tornado that shut it down for a very short time. And now we'll have the slideshow coming up. A lot of good pictures here. I won't talk any longer, so enjoy it. Well, that concludes our countdown of the top weather events of the 2010s. Whether the 2020 is going to bring us, who knows? Well, we'll be here to inform you and warn you of any inclement weather that comes around the area. Thank you for joining us, and have a great 2020.